leading up to 7 p.m.?
Yeah, I think that Denver is obviously huge news. You have Gary Harris and Jamal Murray both questionable. That would give you potentially, if Murray sits, it gives you obviously Monte Morris as a really good value option. If Harris is out, it at least lets you throw some darts at Denver value on a slate where we don't have any great cheap value right now. And then also about 30 minutes or an hour ago, we got Bradley Beal downgraded to questionable with a shoulder injury, which is a different injury than he had missed all those games with previously, but it's still a midday downgrade on Beal. And as we know, if he's out, you're getting all kinds of, McRae and Troy Brown and Ish Smith bumps. So I think those are the two really big pieces of news. We obviously already got that Anthony Davis is out, that Jason Tatum is out. So I think those are the two biggest pieces we're waiting on.
All right. And it looks like the stream showed up a little bit late, but basically you didn't miss anything. Welcome to the Deeper Dive presented by Super Draft. Dave Lochran and Adam Scherf. For anyone that missed that, I think everyone would have missed it. Happy to have you guys with us once again on this wonderful Wednesday night. 10 games to touch on. Adam just broke down the injury news that he's paying attention to. So let's go ahead and dive into it. First, say hi to our sponsor, Super Draft. The future of daily fantasy sports has arrived, friends, and that's at Super Draft, where you can experience their exclusive game mode multiplier. Say goodbye to salary restrictions and hello to lineup freedom. Use your fantasy sports knowledge to draft any player you want. No salaries, build your very own dream team. Not the same structure as these other sites, so it's unique. It's something cool to try out if you haven't done so yet. And if you wanted to, you can get free $20 in Super Cash simply by signing up and depositing $100 or more. So you get $20 in free Super Cash to play on the site with your first deposit of $100 or more. All you have to do is use the sign-up code, promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, to get that $20 on your first $100 deposit or more. You can download SuperDraft in the App Store or play at superdraft.io. SuperDraft, no limits, more winning, sponsor of the Deeper Dive. All right, let's dive into it, man. We got 10 games to cover here. Boston and Detroit. You mentioned Jason Tatum is sidelined for this one. When you look at some of the numbers for the Boston Celtics with Tatum off the floor, you don't have a ton of a sample because, while Tatum hasn't missed any games, I think he only missed 2 last year, and this team's a lot different than it was anyway. But Walker, 31% usage, 1.36 fantasy points per minute, 26% assists without Tatum. Per minute production increases quite dramatically despite not seeing a ton of minutes without him on the floor, and his usage goes up about 4% as well. Brown sees a decent but not substantial increase. Hayward, not much. Cantor, though, and this can be misleading, Adam, because a lot of Cantor's minutes aren't just going to come when he was playing off the bench, not just going to come with Tatum off the floor, but with a lot of the starters off the floor. But I'll give it to you anyway because the minutes are somewhat significant. 24% usage rate, 1.41 fantasy points per minute, and a 29% rebound rate with Tatum off the floor, compared to 20% usage, 1.19 fantasy points per minute, and 21% rebounding with him on the floor. So assuming Daniel Tice is out and Cantor starts again, he should benefit quite a bit, even though we have to put it in context playing alongside Walker, Brown, and Hayward.
Yeah, the last update on Tice that I saw was that he was tracking towards playing. Okay. So that is another piece of news, though, obviously, because if Tice is in, it gives you some much needed value on this slate as well. If he's out, then it's a bump for Cantor.
So what are we doing here? No Jason Tatum. I guess for now, like you said, we'll assume that Daniel Tice is in, but the Tatum news is pretty significant against the Detroit team that over the past 30 days ranks 29th in defense.
Yeah, it's a good matchup. Detroit hasn't been defending well at all. Kemba, you mentioned the numbers that basically no matter who you put on the floor, if you take Jason Tatum off, Kemba's usage rate goes up above 30%. His per minute production goes up to at least 1.3 points or higher, depending on who he's on the floor with. And his salary is really affordable today. So he looks like a really good option to me. The only real negative that I found looking at Kemba was that Detroit has actually been good at defending against pick and roll ball handlers this year. They've been really efficient, which is not great when you're talking about one of the league leaders in pick and roll possessions in Kemba, but it goes back to, play type data is great and it's nice to look at, but minutes and opportunity are still are still more important to me than that. So an overall inefficient defense, plenty of minutes for Kemba, an affordable price tag, and an increase in usage without Tatum makes him look like a really good option. Jaylen Brown has averaged around the fantasy point per minute alongside Kemba without Tatum. He should play 33, 34 minutes at least, which makes him look pretty appealing. Gordon Hayward, same boat. I have him a little bit behind Jaylen Brown, but as another guy that you can certainly get to, especially because him and Brown are both forward eligible. So, which is, I think, a weaker position than the guard position today.
Brooklyn Silver in YouTube chat says, my head is exploding. So many moving parts with this slate. Yeah, I think some of the big news, though, you mentioned earlier, we've already gotten a lot of it. So we're just waiting on a few other pieces that hopefully we'll get. Some of them might seem significant, but they're not. So, look, yeah, just it's very important that we pay attention to a lot of these big names coming up to 7 p.m. That's why we have Live Before Lock that comes up after us as well to touch on anything we missed. The Detroit side.
Hang on, I want to mention one other thing on the Boston side.
Please go ahead.
It's not anything I'm excited about, but with the way cheap value looks right now, especially on DraftKings where pricing is pretty tight today, I'm actually getting to a decent amount of Brad Wanamaker at 3K. I'm not playing him with Kemba because the easiest path to Wanamaker having a good game is something happens to Kemba. But either way, like I haven't projected for 20 minutes. I haven't projected for like 17 fantasy points. And just because there's no value down at that price range, I'm getting there right now. Hopefully, some stuff opens up that changes that. But
yeah,
that's right.
And the one thing that could literally wipe Brad Wanamaker out of your player pool entirely is all contingent upon what happens with the Denver backcourt.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if Jamal Murray gets ruled out and you get Monte Morris starting, or if
Harris is questionable too.
Well, right. But if Harris is out, I think it kind of ends up just being like the last time you got like Craig starting and you got
some Beasley.
You got some minutes for Beasley. Like so,
right.
So I don't think Harris
significant. Right, sure. And I think Barton, the same thing when Will Barton was out, you saw a lot of just ugly blend of cast-offs. But, that's a big piece right there. That'll change everything. Let's talk about the Detroit side. There actually is a decent amount to get to here. First of all, Derrick Rose is averaging 31 minutes in regulation over his last 5 games. Pretty significant. 2 of them went to overtime, but he played 30-plus in both of them. And then in the front court, dude, Andre Drummond was benched for what Dwayne Casey said was performance-based. And that starts to look ugly given that the reason he was benched is because he couldn't contain Jahlil Okafor. Now, look, that's not the only reason, but Jahlil Okafor had a monster game. And believe it or not, dominated Andre Drummond in the post and around the basket. With this team slipping further and further out of playoff contention, it does appear that I don't know. What doesn't make sense is like Dwayne, they're slipping out of contention, but then Rose is getting 30-plus minutes. Meanwhile, Andre Drummond plays 22 because Casey didn't like the way he was playing.
Yeah, and I think it also it had to do with the second unit brought them back, and Christian Wood was obviously playing really, really well. So I'm not really taking anything away from Drummond's last 2 games. Obviously, 2 games ago, he was ejected. Last game was a really weird game flow dynamic. So I'd actually mentioned in the expert survey today that I liked Drummond a lot in tournaments because his salary has come down a bit and because the ownership isn't really there. That being said, though, now that I've crunched some lineups, I'm still not getting to a lot of him. And I think the reason for that is just that there's such a lack of value that I have to prioritize where I'm going when I do pay up. And I'm still getting to more, like LeBron and guys like that over Drummond. So I think that if we get some more value between now and lock, I would start to get to more Drummond. But right now it's still tough for me to get there. It's just that I'm not taking any negatives away from the last couple of games. Like the biggest issue that I would point to is that with Christian Wood being his primary backup, there's going to just be some games where Christian Wood plays really well off the bench and Drummond loses some minutes. But you're still talking about someone that in his range of outcomes has 38, 39 minutes. So I don't really think his salary should be dropping just because he's had 2 bad games.
So specifically a tournament option for you, but one that you have quite a bit of interest in because of his ownership?
Yeah, except I'm not getting to nearly as much as I thought I would just as a result of kind of the lack of value right now.
What else in Detroit stands out to you, if anything? It is, of course, a difficult matchup against the Celtics, in which they're pretty heavy dogs, 9.5-point dogs on the road.
Yeah, not much else. Getting to a little bit of Derrick Rose just because he's still pretty cheap, still playing, playing around 30 minutes, but tough matchup at Boston. A lot of really good guard options on this slate too.
Okay. Move it on then.
Yep.
Let's talk about Philly and Brooklyn. Kyrie Irving, man, a lot of us expected minutes to be limited. He ended up playing 32 minutes, scored 32 points, had 11 assists and 5 rebounds. Like I said, 32 minutes against Utah. He's playing a second of a back-to-back today and appears to be feeling a whole lot better. $7,900 on DraftKings over there on FanDuel. You've got him weighing in at $7,900 as well. I don't know, man. I guess those cortisone shots in the shoulder are holding up for him, huh?
Yeah, and I think that he looks like a good option today, especially with where his ownership's sitting right now, not getting much of it. And I'm just not really that concerned about the minutes. In his first game back, he played 14 or 15 first half minutes and then sat the whole fourth quarter in a blowout. Yesterday, he played 32 minutes, and he had said before that game that he was playing both days. He said right after the game that he felt great. So I'm just not really that concerned about the minutes. I have him in for 31 here. It's obviously a tough matchup against Philly, but Kyrie should really never be this cheap if you assume that he is playing a full allotment of minutes. If you kind of map out his rates for him playing part of his time with Dinwiddie and part of his time with LeVert on the floor, he still comes out to about a 33% usage rate and a 33% assist percentage this season. It is a tough matchup against Philly, but the upside's really high for someone that is sitting at $7,900. So if his ownership's going to be low, I like going right back to Kyrie.
Yeah, I'm with you. With Kyrie Irving earlier in the season, we were seeing some really high upside performances from him, and when you just look at someone like Spencer Dinwiddie, who isn't nearly as naturally gifted or talented as Irving. And in this offense, he was also giving us some really solid outings consistently. Kyrie Irving's a much better player. So if you're expecting him to get his usual minutes, right, and he's basically the same price Dinwiddie was before Irving came back, it's hard to not have interest there when you and I have said so many times, oh, yeah, Dinwiddie at 7,800 is fine.
Right. And to take a step back, and you mentioned that Irving was having some really good games before his injury. For the season, excluding bonus points, he's averaged 1.45 DraftKings points per minute. If you assume he gets around 30 minutes, that would just an average projection would put him up at like 43 fantasy points. I have him projected a little bit lower than that because of the matchup, but I really think that it's important to keep in mind that Kyrie is really cheap today.
We'll get to the Sixers in a minute, but is there anything else for Brooklyn that is of interest to you? For me, there's really not. DeAndre Jordan yesterday was fine, and he ended up being fine, but there's really not much here. Wilson Chandler's off the injury list, so that's just one more body that kind of is going to eat up minutes. Garrett Temple's still out though, but for me, it's mostly just Irving. What about you?
Yeah, it's pretty much Irving. Karis LeVert's going to have a blow up game at his price point in the near future, but hopefully it's not today because I'm not getting to a lot of them.
Okay. So Philly really has been, whether you believe in this stuff or not, they have been way different at home and on the road. I mean, there's no denying it right now. They're 8-2 at home. They're 7-14 on the road, 6 straight road losses. Entirely different team. What's interesting about this with Joel Embiid still out is, first of all, you haven't seen anything on a starting lineup yet, right?
Right.
Okay, so I think you could see Brett Brown's not on the hot seat because they're never gonna fire him, and it's very unfortunate. Can't wait to pour one out, but he has to make some adjustments here, even with Embiid off. And I think one of those adjustments might be taking Mike Scott out of the starting lineup. I mean, the only purpose Mike Scott serves is shooting, and he hasn't been shooting well. Defensively, he's not your guy. He does not have basketball IQ, to say the least. Maybe Matisse Thybulle comes in knowing that this roster, while it's constructed super strange, is still very easy to pull Tobias from the 3 to the 4 and Horford, or 3 to the 4 and throw someone in at a wing position. I wouldn't be surprised to see Scott out of the starting lineup today.
Yeah, I could see that happening. Last game, you got 28 minutes from Thybulle. He closed. You also got 23 minutes from Korkmaz. So they both played more than Scott, who only played 18 minutes.
Right.
I think that That's certainly possible. And also, they both, Korkmaz and Thibault, both fall into that same category as Wanamaker, where I really hope I don't end up rostering them. But the way things look right now, just because they let me get to whatever else I want in my lineup, they're guys that, you can certainly throw in there and just hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have differences in pricing, not by a ton, but I think the one advantage for a guy like Thibault is he could come out here and play another 28 minutes, maybe even 30 if he's playing well. I don't see that being the case for Wanamaker. Maybe you do.
No. I have Wanamaker at 20 minutes. I have Thibault at 28.
Okay.
I just have Wanamaker as a better per minute guy.
Yeah, neither of them are particularly stellar when it comes to their actual per minute production. But yeah, I think it's worth keeping an eye out for what happens here in the starting lineup. Wouldn't be at all surprised to see Brett Brown try and mix it up a little bit. But I digress. What are we doing with the rest of the Sixers team?
I think that the pricing on the Sixers looks really good. You have Al Horford and Tobias
Famous
Harris.
Last words.
Yeah. Their salaries really haven't increased much with Embiid out. You got about 39 minutes last game from Harris. You got about 35 from Horford. Not overly productive, but for the season with Ben Simmons on the floor, Harris has averaged 1.16 points per minute. Horford's averaged 1.12. They're both really affordable. I think Harris really stands out as one of my higher owned guys tonight. Horford, I think, is a pretty strong option as well. Simmons is interesting to me because he's still playing monster minutes. We got 40 minutes from him last game, and you're seeing him be more aggressive and more productive too. But it strikes me as a pretty scary matchup for him, with Brooklyn not only being a really efficient defense recently, but also allowing the fifth fewest points in the paint over the last month. For someone that is going to refuse to shoot the ball and is incapable of shooting the ball from beyond the rim, basically, it's kind of a scary matchup for him. So I think the salary is still reasonable. I think that he's an okay option, but I just think that his ownership is going to be a little bit higher than I would like, and I'll probably end up coming in under the field on him, whereas I'm getting over the field on someone like Harris.
Okay. So if you're ranking these Sixers today, and I know you said the pricing looks good, you're right, and Brooklyn's still one of the one team that plays at a pretty fast pace, top 10 in the league. How would you be ranking these Sixers players?
Harris, Horford, Simmons, and then the rest is kind of a dumpster fire. Richardson, and then I guess like taking some shots on Thibault just because.
Okay, yeah, and obviously we'll wait to see what the starting lineup looks like. Things can change and sway opinions a little bit, but I think that hits on it for now. We got 10 games to get through, going to number 3. I don't know how long this one's going to take us. I can't imagine it'll be all that long. Miami and San Antonio. So you got a 221.5 total on this, which is, okay. Yeah, Miami's a 5-point favorite. But all in all, I don't know if there's anything here that stands out to me. If I'm looking for value, I don't see much there. Spurs defensively, look, they're really middle of the road. That's kind of what they are in every phase of the game this season. They're just kind of middle of the road. Miami, meanwhile, has played pretty solid defense. Doesn't play at an elevated pace. I know this game is a 221 total, which in today's basketball is fine. But no one stands out as a great play from this game for me. What are you doing with either side? Yeah,
same boat for me. I mean, it's just a pretty unappealing game, I think. Pricing looks pretty good for everyone. Like from the Miami side, Jimmy Butler's salary is fine, but I would rather go to like a Ben Simmons or a lot of other guys in that price range. On the San Antonio side, you just have minutes being all over the place for everyone that isn't DeMar DeRozan or LaMarcus Aldridge. Last game, you got like 21 minutes from DeJounte Murray, and Derek White closed the game. White is the kind of guy at 3,600 that you can, again, just kind of throw a dart at and hope that he has a game where he plays more minutes, but it's certainly not someone you're going to feel confident in. So I think out of every game on the slate, this is definitely one of the least appealing to me.
Yeah, what do you make of Bam lately, seeing a bit of a downturn in production? I don't know how much of it is to actually be concerned about, but rebounding's down, usage, per minute production is down. I wonder how much of that is just him having to play 38 minutes a night.
Yeah, I think that's possible. And then also outside of Winslow, the team is finally fully healthy. Like you notice a drop in his assist numbers and his usage since Goran Dragic came back, which it's not like he's taking a big step back, but it does make sense when you add Dragic to the Tyler Hero, Kendrick Nunn, Jimmy Butler mix that you're getting a little bit less production from someone like Bam.
Just a lot more mouths to feed overall. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, from either side, is there anything else you want to hit on, or you want to just spend some additional time on some of these better games?
Yeah, other games look better.
Minnesota and Indy. Let's get to this one. So here, okay, first of all, 218.5 total. Pacers 2.5 point favorites here in Minnesota. So we get that out of the way first. Here's what's interesting. Now, Ryan Saunders said, head coach of the Timberwolves, he had said that Karl-Anthony Towns' last game was inactive due to a bug. Now, could the knee have had something to do with that? Maybe, but he said explicitly that this was due to a bug. And then when asked by the media if a return this week is possible, he said yes. So, I mean, when it comes to Towns, you and I have pretty much been just assuming he's not going to play. This is different for me, where I could see Karl-Anthony Towns making his return tonight.
Yeah, so could I. I really don't have confidence in it one way or the other. If I had to guess, I would guess that he comes back because, like you said, Saunders had that quote, and it showed up on the injury report too. He went from being questionable with the knee to questionable with an illness. And so, I think that there's as good a chance today that he returns as there is, there has been in the last month, I think. Fortunately, I don't think it has a huge impact. The biggest impact I think it has is that Gorgie Deng is only $5K on FanDuel. I could see getting to him there if Towns is out, but it's still not like it would be a huge priority for me. So I don't think it matters all that much, which is nice.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, the one thing here is I've talked about it extensively. They have been better with Gorgie Deng defensively, but their pace doesn't really change, which is kind of interesting. They're still maybe a little bit faster with Towns, but they're still playing at an elevated pace. If Towns comes back, could probably make a better argument for Sabonis, but he's just been really good anyway. Let's tackle this Timberwolves team first. Let's assume Towns plays. How are you going to tackle this Timberwolves team with Towns on the floor, presumably?
Yeah, it's not a team that really has priorities for me. Towns is expensive enough where after missing a month, I assume you're not getting 37, 38 minutes out of him. So he's not someone I'm really looking at. It would obviously take Gorgie off the board. It would take Naz Reid as a value off the board. Not that either of those are particularly appealing anyway. And then for the other pieces, I just don't really think it changes that much anyway, because Andrew Wiggins is already cheap. He's actually been more productive with Towns on the floor than off this year. Yep. He's a secondary option for me one way or the other. You have Shabazz Napier and Jeff Teague, both at really inexpensive price points, but also essentially splitting 48 minutes. So neither of them are very appealing outside of just we don't have much value, and they're going to end up in some tournament lineups, but it's not like it's overly appealing. So Towns just doesn't have that much of an impact for me one way or the other. It's not a team that I'm particularly high on with him in or out.
It's super easy to just flood defenders over to Wiggins when Towns is off the floor, because like who else are you going to defend? He has a 45% effective field goal percentage with Towns off the court this year, 54% with him on. He's shooting from the field 8% better with Towns on the floor this year. That's a pretty significant difference.
Yeah, it is. And the usage hasn't really been different. So the efficiency is big.
Yeah, 30% usage rate with Towns on the floor. Pretty solid. Again, they don't really have a lot of shooters. 29%. It's actually lower with Towns off the court this year. How about that?
Yeah, it's strange.
With the Pacers, man, Sabonis has just been a stud, right? He's third in the league in double-doubles behind only Giannis and Drummond. He's got 31 double-doubles. He's been phenomenal, and he's averaging 1.27 DraftKings points per minute. Two guys I want to talk to you about the most are Sabonis and Brogdon, who on DraftKings, he's come back down to earth a bit from that torrid start to the season. But he's still a 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy with 27% usage rate and a 37% assist rate. And he's coming in at like $6,700.
67 on DraftKings.
$6,700 on DraftKings against a lowly defensive opponent in the Timberwolves.
He's one of my favorite guys on the slate.
Yeah, I love him.
I think he's just underpriced. In his first game back, he played about 34 minutes, and across the board, it seems like sites just anticipated him being limited and then didn't react at all to him not being limited. So you have 6,700 on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel. I have him in for 33 minutes. With Sabonis on the floor this year, he has a 25.7% usage rate, 36.5% assist percentage, averages about 1.07 DraftKings points per minute alongside Sabonis. It's a pace-up spot against Minnesota, who's fifth in pace over the last month. They've played much better defensively without Towns, as you mentioned, but I'm just not really concerned about it for Brogdon. And then Sabonis also, it's worth mentioning, is questionable here. I'm expecting he plays since he played last game, but there is some chance that he ends up not playing and Brogdon becomes an even better option.
If Sabonis doesn't play, now Nate McMillan said he doesn't think he's going to miss any time, but if he didn't play, Brogdon would become, he's already a great mid-range option here. If he didn't play, he'd be one of the top overall plays. He kind of is already one of the preferred options, but man, I would absolutely love Brogdon against the Timberwolves, and which should certainly be a competitive game. Now, for the rest of Indy, it's tough for me, assuming Sabonis plays, to really have or find much interest. What are you thinking on the non-Brogdon and Sabonis Pacers?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same for me. One interesting thing from their last game was that the starters played massive minutes. You got I think it was 38 minutes from Turner, 37 from Warren. Jeremy Lamb played 22. He basically got benched. But outside of that, you were getting really, really big minutes from the starters. I'm not projecting that kind of run, obviously, but I do have the starting unit in for 34 minutes, with the exception of Lamb, who I gave 27. It's not the pricing came up on those guys, so it's still not really enough for me to get there. I do think Lamb is someone you can take a shot at on DraftKings, though. He's only 4,600. He has guard forward eligibility. There's obviously a lot of risk because he can pretty easily just be taken off the floor, as we saw last game, but we've also seen plenty of games where he starts, plays 30, 32 minutes, and at 4,600, he can certainly pay that off.
All right.
So Brogdon's the priority for me, and then Lamb is kind of just a value guy that I'm getting to.
Okay. Chat excoriating people for getting injury news wrong. Get him. All right. OKC in Toronto. Talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder 1-point favorites, 212.5 total here against Toronto. Marcus Gasol expected to play in this one. You know, I was looking over just some player tracking data from Sabonis Shai Gilgeous-Alexander last game. Do you know how many? This guy had 24 rebound chances. He had 20 rebounds. What's strange to me is he had 8 potential assists and 10 actual assists. So I don't know how all this is being tracked, but point being, he averages 6 potential assists and 9.4 rebound chances per game on the year. Unless something has changed dramatically, this is like the greatest outlier games of outlier games that we're going to see this season.
I had no idea who you were talking about until that last part, and now I know you're talking about Gilgeous-Alexander.
Oh, okay. Well, now you do. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not chasing that game. Obviously, he's capable of doing it. He just did it. But his salary went up, too. I'm not going back. I think he's actually the least appealing guy from OKC for me tonight, just because he is more expensive than everyone else. There's no real reason that I can see to pay $7,400 for Gilgeous-Alexander instead of paying $6,600 for Chris Paul or even $5,500 for Dennis Schroeder. They're all guys that can have good games. It's not a great matchup for any of them. I would rather just go to cheaper options.
Okay. So, yeah. Let's see here. Let's say Sabonis does play. I'll just throw this to you. How much more do you like Malcolm Brogdon at 67 than, say, Chris Paul at 66 on DraftKings?
I have Paul at 35.5 DraftKings points. I have Brogdon at 38. So
quite a bit.
In the crunch that I did before the show for DraftKings, I got 40% Brogdon, 20% Paul.
Okay. Yeah, I think Paul is definitely more appealing on DraftKings. And you get Gilgeous-Alexander coming in at 7,400. That's a pretty big price difference. On FanDuel, different positions, but they're basically the same price over there. So, it's whatever. I wouldn't say either of them is a top option against the Raptors, who even despite all these injuries have still been, pretty competent defensively. You still haven't seen them, coughing up a ton of points at them. And I think it's worth noting that they have been still limiting teams. And also, you get Marc Gasol back today. I don't know how many minutes we expect him to play, but he is expected to play coming off that hamstring injury. Anything else on OKC before we get to the Raptors?
No, it's kind of just secondary options and filler for me. Like outside of Gilgeous Alexander, I think that all the starters are affordably priced, but none of them look great. I think Paul's the top option for me from this team.
Okay. Let's move over to Toronto. Like I said a couple times, Marc Gasol is returning. Pascal Siakam returned last game, played 30 minutes. I would expect him to be, way up from where we saw that. Essentially, Norman Powell's back. So with Marc Gasol rejoining the rotation, Fred VanVleet is really the only player now that will be inactive after this team was decimated by injuries no more than a week ago.
Yeah, pretty much fully healthy except for VanVleet. So now you're getting into that situation where a lot of guys are priced up because of injuries. Lowry's over 8K, which he's still playing 38 minutes. It's not like it's a bad price, but he doesn't stand out like guys on teams that have injuries, like a Kemba Walker or something like that. Same goes, Siakam's at a good price point. He's only 7,800 on DraftKings, but we don't know how many minutes he'll play. I have him in for 34. I don't know if he gets immediately back to the 37 or 38 that he was playing previously. So not really exciting there. And then for everyone else, just not really appealing at all. So I think Toronto is one of my lower owned teams today.
Okay. If we have a moderator in chat, get this clown out of here. Let's okay, so there's your minutes. Sorry, I looked over. A dog's grabbing all my stuff on the couch and trying to nest into a spot, but yeah. Meanwhile, you've got a dog next door that has really become friends with you, huh?
Yeah, he's actually been quiet for ever since I was talking about it earlier, so I don't know.
Yeah, Adam was saying some pretty sadistic stuff this morning about poor puppy that's been left alone in his house with nobody to talk to. Yeah, okay. I mean, let me ask you, would you be able to hear that dog through, would I be able to hear it? Is it that loud to where if we were doing a show, it would be audible?
Josh said he thought he could hear it yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty loud.
He then, to prove that he could hear it, just started mimicking a dog barking like that was proving anything.
That's absurd. All right. We covered OKC. You just broke down the minutes expected here for Toronto. Now, outside of minutes, is there anything that you actually like coming in at okay, Siakam's $7,800 on DraftKings. Forgive me if you mentioned some of this. Just let me know. I was trying to handle some business over here. Anything else or anything you really like for Toronto based on projected minutes or from price point?
Nothing I really like for them. Obviously you're getting a ton of minutes for Lowry. Siakam, I have at 34 minutes. I don't know. I don't really see much from the Toronto side.
ITM Hart says Rotogrinder's sending attacks. Let's talk about Chicago and Washington. Bradley Beal, questionable to play. And Thomas Bryant returned, didn't play a lot of minutes, but he is back. Right now, let's see here with it updated. You got the Bulls 4.5 point favorite. No, 5.5 point favorites now. 228.5 total. Generally speaking, you would think this game would be awesome. Maybe you do, but I would have assumed I would have liked it a lot more individually than I do right now, assuming Beal plays. And something I mentioned to you before the show, something worth keeping an eye on, depending on whether he jumps back into the starting lineup at some point. Almost all of the Wizards, bottom 10 lineups from a defensive standpoint this season, 5-man lineups, have Thomas Bryant in them. They have a 120 defensive rating with him on the floor this season, 112 with him off. Granted, both are terrible, but he has seemingly been a pretty significant liability on the floor defensively.
Yeah, any minutes he plays, they should be worse defensively. Like you said, I don't know how many he plays today. He played 15 or 16 last game. I have him in for 20 right now, but that is something to keep in mind as we go forward, that the more minutes Thomas Bryant's playing and the fewer minutes that Jan Mahinmi's playing, you should be getting an even worse Washington defense.
Okay, so Do you think Beal plays, first of all?
My guess is always no when you get like a 4 o'clock questionable tag. The only thing that makes me think he could is that it's his shoulder and not his knee. Like you would, like he always tries to play through stuff. He has said that he's making it a point of not doing that this time so that he doesn't have, lingering injuries all year. But playing through a shoulder injury is obviously much different than playing through a lower body injury. So it kind of feels like a true 50-50 to me.
Okay. Let's assume he's active. What do you do with this Washington squad now that, okay, so we'll do Washington first because we got the Beal news. Let's assume he's active. Jordan McRae on DraftKings is $6,600. Thomas Bryant's minutes since returning in that one game, he played 15 off the bench. Yamahimi's $4,800, but who knows what the playing time is going to look like here. Davis Bertans, $5,500, played 26 and 21 minutes in reverse order since returning. I mean, with such a high total, you would think that'd be, like I said, a whole lot more appealing.
Yeah, if Beal's in, there's not much that's appealing for me outside of like you can take some shots at Beal, but I'm not even really doing that because there are so many guards that I do like on this slate. But obviously, he just takes a lot of value away from guys like McRae and Troy Brown and Ish Smith and Isaiah Thomas by being in. I think that if Beal's in, my highest owned guy from Washington actually probably ends up being Jan Mahinmi, and it has nothing to do with me thinking he's a great play. It just has to do with really being starved for value right now. Since we don't have news yet on Beal or on Denver.
I know. Look, it's Toronto's getting healthy, and now you've got Washington. They're without Rui. They're without Mo Wagner. But now that Brian is back, if Beal plays, they really aren't down that many bodies to the point where you look at him and say, all right, well, Scott Brooks probably only runs 9 or 10 guys out there. And even if he does, he has a lot more luxury to do what he wants. I mean, Isaiah Thomas, how many minutes are you going to get from him? What are we going to get from Ish Smith, whose price tag is absolutely inflated, given that we can't even project him for 30 minutes? I mean, just going around the horn with this team, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, you see it all the time. Normally what happens is, especially on a 10-game slate, normally you're getting teams that are injured while other teams are getting healthier. But today's just kind of weird where if the Denver guys are in and if Beal's in, you're kind of just getting like every team getting healthy at once. And the teams that are missing guys have been missing them for like a week now. So prices have come up.
Zach LaVine, $9,300 on DraftKings. FanDuel, $8,300. So a big discrepancy in salary from one to the other. He has been really good lately, though, and this month he has a 34% usage rate, 1.31 fantasy points per minute, 21% assist rate. I'd like to see that improve, but he's still a guy that is getting up 20+ shots a night. 9,300. DraftKings clearly preemptively priced him up against the Washington Wizards. We've seen that happen with most guys coming in against them, but he's playing 35+ minutes a night. He's $8,300 on FanDuel. Is Zach LaVine number one too much for you on DraftKings? And how much do you like him on FanDuel against a totally inferior Washington team?
Love him on FanDuel. I like him on DraftKings if I could get there. It's just hard with the lack of value right now. I didn't get to a lot in the crunch I did before the show because even though I have him projecting really well, he's just so much more expensive than guys like Kemba and Malcolm Brogdon and Jaylen Brown on a site where there's not a lot of value. So he's kind of like Andre Drummond for me, where I would love to get to more of him on DraftKings, but it's just really, really tough for me to do so right now. But the minutes are really nice. He's playing 36, 37 minutes in competitive games. Since Chris Dunn joined the starting lineup at the end of November, LaVine has a 32.5% usage rate, 20% assist percentage. He's been really productive. It's a good spot against Washington. There's nothing outside of the fact that he's $9,300 that makes me dislike him.
Daniel Tice is available to play for Boston, and I'm with you with this on FanDuel. 8,300 is just too cheap. I mean, put it this way: there's no real reason, even if DeRozan's been playing better lately, that LaVine should only be $500 more expensive.
Right.
I just don't see that happening. 93 is a little bit more difficult to get to him. You have a number of guys. I think you have 10 players priced at $9K or above. So there are a lot of options in that top tier range to make Zach LaVine a little bit less of a priority given his elevated price point. But I definitely like him a lot on FanDuel. He's also going to have more ownership there than on DraftKings for obvious reasons. What about Thomas Satoransky and the rest of the Chicago team?
Nothing that looks great to me. More like secondary options. The minutes for Satoransky have been down over the last couple of games, which concerns me because it's coincided with Ryan Arcidiacono being back in the rotation. Kobe White is still getting his minutes, so it's kind of just taking some minutes off the top for Satoransky, I think. Chris Dunn normally playing around 30 minutes. His price tag at 5,100 is somewhat appealing. I think he's my second favorite option from Chicago on DraftKings, but it's still just not something that I think I'm going to get to a lot. It's kind of, we've seen Chicago's rotation this year, like go back and forth where they run a really tight rotation and then they like throw an extra guy in. And right now they've been throwing Arcidiacono in. Boylan's talked about how he's been really happy with his play. So I don't think he's going away anytime soon. So it makes it a lot tougher to get to anyone that isn't LaVine for me.
Okay. Let's keep it moving. Hey, before we do, if you aren't a premium sub at Awesemo, we got this free content. We love providing it to you. We love everybody that comes here every day and has made this part of their process. But if you haven't checked it out yet, very easy and economical way to get half off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum all access subscription. Just use the promo code Deeper Dive. One word, Deeper Dive. When you check out, it'll get you 50% off your first week. That's ownership projections, the player projections, all of our premium articles, all of our top tools that are developed and used by Awesemo, Alex Baker himself. If you don't know that name, well, he's the number one ranked DFS player in the universe, and all of the lineup builder, all of our everything that we have outside of Fantasy Cruncher, that is an add-on. But I would definitely recommend checking that off too, so you're getting everything you need to really be a successful DFS player. And we also have other packages, like we have a $3.95 weekly Express subscription. If you are, if you're hurting right now or you just don't want to spend for premium content, we have that and a lot of other ways for any type of player, whether you're a hobbyist or whether you're serious, whether you're a pro. We've got something for all of you. But to get half off your first week and you want to check it out, you want to get a good idea of whether or not it's worth it, use the promo code Deeper Dive, one word. And when you do, say what's up in our premium Slack chat. We get people talking DFS in there all around the clock. So it's a good place to be when there aren't shows and when you're not reading content. Deeper Dive, all one word, 50% off your first week. We'll see you over there. All right, man, we've got 6 down, 4 to go. Denver, Charlotte. Now, this is really, if you want to talk about the most pivotal spot that could change everything and flip this slate on its head, this is it right here, Adam. It's Gary Harris, Jamal Murray, both questionable. We don't have any confirmation one way or the other. The only thing I can say is that Denver went from 12.5-point favorites to 11.5-point favorites, but that's really not telling us much. 208 over under. So, on its face, assuming that everyone plays, this is the lowest over under on the entire slate. The Charlotte Hornets have the lowest implied total on the entire slate. They are also the biggest dog on the slate. So this game, if everyone's healthy, really, I don't know how much you want to overpay for guys, but we will start and we'll finish it out with the backcourt. Let's start with Nikola Jokic in a good spot against the Charlotte team that allows more points per possession in the post than any other team. They've really been beat up in the paint this season, no matter what their center rotation looks like. Is that good enough for you to get to Jokic here, or do you worry about a blowout? Do you worry about his erratic production?
The biggest thing I worry about is that this game's going to be so slow.
Terribly slow.
Yeah, I mean, you have Charlotte, who's the slowest team in the league over the last month by 2 possessions. You have Denver, who's 25th or 26th in pace. Yeah. So that's my biggest concern. But
94 possessions per 48. I know we rail on this, but like that is really, really slow for today's basketball.
Yeah, the next slowest team over the last month is Indiana at 96.9. So crazy. 2.5 possessions per 48. But it is a really good spot for Jokic. And the thing that really stands out to me is that right now we have him projected for about 4% ownership on DraftKings. That's really appealing for someone who does benefit from Paul Millsap being out. If you put Jamal Murray on the floor and take Millsap off, Jokic has averaged 1.47 DraftKings points per minute this season compared to 1.27 if you put both of them on the floor. Obviously, if Murray sits, it only gets even better for Jokic. But I think that the matchup's great. I think that he benefits from Millsap being out. And while his salary isn't the most desirable, I do think that with basically no ownership going there, it does make for a really good tournament option. So right now I got to like 12% Jokic on DraftKings, which would put me like 4 times the field, which is a spot that I'm pretty happy with.
Okay. By the way, yesterday you guys helped us hit 1,000 likes before the Live Before Lock even started. That's awesome. It's the best we've done, and we appreciate you for that. Amazing stuff, hitting 1,000 likes before this show even finished, or like right after it finished. So always appreciate. The easiest way to support us, hit that thumbs up button so we keep doing free content like this. What about the wing positions? Let's assume everyone's healthy. Let's just for now, and then we'll flip it and assume they're not. What are we doing with Denver not named Nikola Jokic? Tyler Hero just got ruled out for Miami, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what to do with that, but I'll think about it while I talk about Denver.
We'll get to that at the end. Go ahead. I don't think it's that. I don't think it has that many implications. They have such a large backfield right now, or backcourt.
Backfield, sorry. Yeah. Backcourt. If Harris and Murray are in, I think Murray is an okay tournament option. Like I would still prefer Chris Paul, but Murray would look okay. Jokic would still be the number one guy. Outside of that, there wouldn't really be much here for me. If even one of them sits, though, like if Harris sits, you and I mentioned it before, but I think it's kind of a mix of a few extra minutes for a lot of guys. But with how cheap they are, even if I give Monte Morris like 20 minutes, or I give Malik Beasley 20 minutes, or Porter, 18 minutes, I'm going to get around, like 10%, just kind of like sprinkling those guys in. If it's just Harris out, I wouldn't want more than one of them together, but I would be fine just kind of taking shots at them and hoping that they do well in 20 minutes. If Murray is out, then you get a clear beneficiary in Monte Morris, who should draw the start, should play a bunch of minutes, and would be the clear number one value on the slate. So there is a difference for me as far as who is in or out between Murray and Harris. But either way, if one of them sits, I start getting to the cheap backups on Denver. Okay.
Yeah. If Murray doesn't play, let's say Murray and Harris don't play. Let's go ahead and do this. Talk to me about what you see the minutes being at, and I'll tell you what I have them at too.
Yeah, I think that if they don't play, I would go 30 minutes for Morris. I would assume that Barton backs up Morris. So it's a bump for Will Barton as well if Murray sits. And then, so if Harris is out also, I would expect you're getting probably Torrey Craig starting, but it could be any of Craig, Beasley, or Porter. I would expect that if Craig starts, he gets like 22 minutes. Beasley probably plays like 24. If Beasley starts, I would give Beasley a couple more minutes.
That's the problem. See, I would give Beasley 28 if he starts. If he doesn't start, I'd probably put him around like 23, 24 as well. I think a lot of it also would depend on how Craig plays if he does start, but we can't really predict that. But we'd both agree that Monte Morris in this spot would be the best overall value play on the slate by a pretty substantial margin.
Yeah, and I think the thing to keep in mind too is that even though there's a lot of interchangeable pieces for Denver coming off the bench that could soak up minutes, you want to play the ones that are the ones that are productive when they're out there. So you're taking a little bit less risk. Like even if someone like Torrey Craig is starting, he probably needs to play like 36 minutes for him to start being someone you want in your lineups. Whereas if you just get like 20 minutes from Beasley, he starts looking okay.
Yep. Monte Morris, a 0.89 fantasy point per minute player for his career. So he's never been spectacular, but not terrible either. On the opposite...
For a Will Barton, he's played 162 minutes this year without Murray or Jokic on the floor. And I say Jokic because I would assume Barton's running the second unit. 25% usage, 25% assist percentage.
What are we doing with the Charlotte side, if anything, today? It is, as you mentioned, not only a slow matchup. It's actually technically pays up for the Hornets, but not. Obviously, I'm being facetious. it's just, even though Denver hasn't played nearly as solid defense this season, this is a brutal matchup in terms of pace and them just being decent enough to really limit this Charlotte team as a whole on the road in the altitude at the Pepsi Center.
Yeah, the only thing that I would point out is DraftKings specific. You have $3,900 Cody Zeller with power forward eligibility. Not appealing where you have to roster him at center, but he started the last game after playing a bunch of minutes 2 games ago. Started the last game, only played about 22 and a half minutes, but if he continues to start, I would expect his minutes to go up. It's not like it's an appealing matchup, but again, if you can roster him at forward and only pay $3,900 for him, that's fine. And then also we got a DNP for Bismack Biyombo last game, 16 minutes for Guillermo Hernan-Gomez. I don't know if that'll be the case again today. Like, he will get abused by Mason Plumlee, I would think, if they try that. But he did play well, so maybe they go back to him. At 3,200, if you get 16 minutes from Hernan Gomez, he's another just cheap dice roll guy.
Okay. Yeah, I would say so as well. Plus, we don't know what it's going to look like in terms of this game getting out of hand. But would that be it for you in Charlotte?
Yeah.
Houston and Portland. Second game of a back-to-back. Harden dropped 41 yesterday, but the real story was about Giannis. How about that? 37, 9, and 4 in 21 minutes. I know we don't have time to talk about it, but is that one of the most absurd things you've ever seen?
Yeah, I couldn't believe he'd actually played 21 minutes when you posted that.
That's just crazy, dude. They had 39 points in 21. He averaged almost 2 points, not fantasy points, but points per minute. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, let's get back to it. Houston and Portland here. High projected total in this game. Currently the highest on the slate by almost 9 points. 236.5, man. Houston 8.5 point favorites. 122.5 total for them. 114 for Portland. Just a really fast pace, projected high scoring game. What are we doing with Houston here, knowing that Westbrook's back in the lineup? Harden's price tag has come down, but if you want to play him, you're still paying a premium.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting game for tournaments because there should be a lot of scoring here, but we're not projecting a lot of ownership to go to these guys. I think it'll be a little easier to get to Harden on FanDuel, but on DraftKings at 12,400, obviously he's not like an optimal play, but we haven't projected for 5% ownership. I still think he's the highest scorer on the slate a high percentage of the time. And so I like the idea of being overweight on him. I'm not saying that I'm like jamming Harden at 12-4 into a bunch of lineups, but right now I got between 10 and 15%, which would put me pretty nicely over the field. Westbrook, kind of the same thing. He's cheaper than Harden. He's still not inexpensive though. Like, he's still a lot more expensive than some of these other guards that we've liked, and that'll keep his ownership down. But he's another guy that obviously has a monster ceiling at his salary. And then I really like Clint Capella. Portland over the last month has allowed the most offensive rebounds per game to opponents. They've allowed I think it's 6th most total rebounds per game. Capella's 3rd in the league in both total rebounds and offensive rebounds per game. He's still cheap. Played about 40 minutes last night. I think you get at least 36, assuming a competitive game. So he looks like a really, really good center option to me as well.
Okay. Do you want to go to Portland?
I'll make the obligatory PJ Tucker mention as well.
All right. He's
questionable, but if he plays a lot of minutes.
I amazingly got a good PJ Tucker game last week, which was shocking. And he was in foul trouble and played less minutes than usual. I couldn't believe it. I feel like, I want to cash in, cash in and step away from the table.
Well, the thing that stands out to me today is that probably because he's listed as questionable, we have him projected for 3% ownership at 4,200 on DraftKings. Those are the days where I like to play PJ Tucker because at least I'm getting some sort of reward for playing the most miserable guy in basketball.
Chalk PJ Tucker is like one of the worst things you could do in DFS. Totally agree with you. We got an ownership update 1 minute ago. Tucker is at 2% now. So, yeah, I think that's a reasonable point. How about on the opposite side? Portland going up against a Houston team that does play at a really fast pace this season. While defensively they've ranked middle of the road, it's still a spot where if this game stays competitive, you could see some big performances from both sides of this one.
Yeah, I think so. I think that Whiteside would be the first spot that I look to from Portland. He only played about 24 minutes last game. He had been questionable going into that game with an upper respiratory infection. It was the second game in a row where he'd been questionable. He played 34 minutes in the first one, played 24 in the second one. The salary is really cheap on DraftKings at 8,200, and he's not on the injury report today. So I'm assuming he's fine. Maybe people kind of underproject him because of only playing 24 minutes last game, but he's averaged 1.35 DraftKings points per minute this year. And prior to last game was playing 33 or 34 plus minutes in competitive games. So I think I like getting the Whiteside. And then you obviously, it's a good spot for CJ McCollum. It's a good spot for Damian Lillard. The problem there is you just start to run into so many good guard options on this slate.
Okay. Steve Finkelstein, our boy, $10 super chat. He said, I'm here for the abused by Mason Plumlee takes. Didn't know this is even possible. Mind blown. I don't even know what you're talking about, but I appreciate you, Steve. Do you want to cover
I said something about Hernan Gomez getting killed
abused by Mason Plumlee. Oh, gotcha. Do you want to hit on the backcourt here? We're kind of short on time. I want to make sure we get through everything, but I think these next two games, we can pretty much pick and choose where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, Lillard and McCollum, I think whatever you get to is fine. Neither one's a priority for me just because there are so many good guards at good pricing today.
Now, how heavy are you on the Carmelo Anthony revenge game narrative?
Just crossed my mind for the first time.
I mean, dude, he played 10 games with Houston last year. That's
they did scapegoat him and embarrass him, but
they kind of did, yeah. Look, could he get up 18 shots? Sure. Is it? In all seriousness, like this game could go back and forth. This could be one that has 23 or 240 points in regulation, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
So,
am I getting Carmelo Anthony in some lineups? Yeah. Does it have anything to do with the fact he used to play for the Rockets? No.
Exactly, right. But he's really not a terrible play. Sacramento and Dallas. Marvin Bagley to be limited again. He played 23 minutes last game. I have him, I think, at 25. Porzingis is going to play in this one. I don't know. This whole game for me, we'll start with Doncic, but in large part, I'm not really excited about this one.
Yeah, neither am I. Dallas has played reasonably well defensively. Neither of these teams are very fast, although Sacramento has played faster since Fox came back. But Luka's still really expensive on DraftKings. I would rather just be getting the Harden if I'm going to that price point. Everything else looks not very appealing. We don't know how many minutes Porzingis will play. Everything else is just at the whims of Rick Carlisle as far as minutes go. So nothing really from the Dallas side for me, unless, I go on FanDuel. Luka's a little bit more favorably priced, but still just prioritizing LeBron and Harden at the top.
It's weird too. This game is a 224.5 total. Given the two teams, didn't that seem a little surprising to you?
Yeah, it seems a little high. But it's also two teams where there's just so many mouths to feed on both teams where even there can very easily be 224 points scored and it's still just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. So from both sides of this, outside of even Luka, like where did you say you had him ranked among the top priced players?
Behind LeBron, behind Harden.
Okay, so you got him number 3 then, are we saying? Definitely? Like
right? Out of the 3, yeah.
Out of the 3, got you. And then Sacramento, anything here for you?
I think Fox and Hield stand out. Just because they're playing big minutes, they should lead the team in usage. Fox at 8K, I didn't get to a whole lot of. I got to more Buddy Hield at 6,500. But again, it's not a spot where I'm prioritizing anything.
All right, let's close it out. LA Lakers and Orlando. As you know, Live Before Locks coming up after us. You'll want to stick around for that. Different stream. So go to the YouTube homepage or just check on Twitter and we'll give you that link coming up right after us. You've got Eddie and I don't know who's with. Is it Spags tonight? Is it Emac? I know Josh is off. It's Eddie and Spags. So Eddie and Spags tonight on Live Before Lock. Anthony Davis is out. The LA Lakers are favored in this one by 9.5 points. Very low total in this game, though. And Rajon Rondo's also out. Kyle Kuzma was a colossal disappointment last time. Game got out of hand, and Dwight Howard ended up erupting off the bench. I'm going to just turn it over to you and let you wrap on the Lakers because the Davis news once again is very significant, and somehow LeBron James' price has not even come up that much.
Yeah, I think that it's a pretty unappealing spot for the Lakers because Orlando plays slow and because they're a good defensive team, but it's still a really, really good price point. 10-4 for LeBron on DraftKings, 10-8 on FanDuel. Obviously, he was awful against the Cavs, but you don't really expect that to happen again. Rondo being out is also a bump for him, just because now every minute he's on the floor, he's out there with like no other ball handlers. So his assist numbers should go up a bit as well. I'm going right back to LeBron just because he's cheap. JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard both look like reasonable options as well. Last game prior to the blowout, you got about 21, 22 minutes from McGee, the rest going to Howard at center. Kyle Kuzma has about a 26% usage rate without Davis on the floor. So secondary options in Kuzma, McGee, and Howard, LeBron's a priority for me.
Me too. Literally would just echo everything you mentioned on that, because that's pretty much the same way I feel every time Anthony Davis is out. Orlando, anything for you? And then we'll get out of here.
I think that Terrence Ross might pick up some ownership, and I think he's an okay flyer just because DJ Augustine's out. I think you could see around 30 minutes from Ross. I think he probably closes. Markelle Fultz could pick up a couple extra minutes as well, but he's not as affordably priced as Ross is. So I think Ross is the guy I get to the most from the Magic.
Appreciate you guys hanging out. As always, remember, before you head out, hit that thumbs up, subscribe, hit the notification bell as well. Live Before Lock, Eddie Spags coming up next. Adam and I will be back with you tomorrow on the Deeper Dive presented by Super Draft. Good luck tonight, everyone.